You think you know who you are. You think if the situation got strange enough, you would still act like yourself. You would still be kind if kindness mattered. You would still be honest if no one was watching. But in 1971, a psychologist at Stanford University built a fake prison in a basement, and within 6 days that idea fell apart completely. His name was Philip Zimbardo, and what he found out about you is still uncomfortable to hear. Here is the setup. Zimbardo took a group of ordinary college students, not criminals, not violent people, just young men who answered a newspaper ad for $15 a day. He split them randomly into 2 groups. Half became guards, half became prisoners. That's it. That was the entire difference between them. A coin flip, essentially, decided who would hold power and who would have none. Within 2 days, the guards were inventing punishments the researchers never told them to use. Within 4 days, prisoners were having breakdowns. By day 6, Zimbardo shut the whole experiment down. It was supposed to run for 2 weeks. So what happened? You might assume the guards were secretly cruel people, and the mask just came off. That's the comfortable explanation. It lets you believe you're different. But that's not what the data says. Zimbardo's conclusion was more disturbing than that, and it has a name. The situation shapes the self, more than the self shapes the situation. Let that sit for a second. Not bad people do bad things. Instead, ordinary people, dropped into a role with a costume, a title, and a rulebook, will bend toward that role faster than you'd like to admit. Think about what a role actually is. It's a set of invisible instructions. A guard uniform says, "You have authority now, act like it." A prisoner number instead of a name says, "You are not an individual here, you are a function." Zimbardo didn't give anyone permission to be cruel. He just built a structure, and the structure did the rest. This wasn't the first time psychology had stumbled onto this pattern. 10 years earlier, a researcher named Stanley Milgram ran a study at Yale that asked a similar question from a different angle. He told ordinary volunteers to deliver what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to another person, simply because a man in a lab coat told them to continue. There were no real shocks, but the volunteers didn't know that, and a shocking number of them kept going, past the point where the victim was screaming, simply because an authority figure said the words, "Please continue." Milgram wasn't testing obedience to evil. He was testing obedience to structure, to a role, to a voice that sounded like it was allowed to give instructions. Here's the pattern connecting both studies, and it's the part that applies directly to you. Your brain does not run on some fixed, unshakable core of who you really are. Your brain runs on context. It reads the room. It reads the uniform. It reads the expectations quietly baked into a situation, and it adjusts your behavior to match, often before you've consciously noticed it happening. This isn't a flaw. It's actually a survival tool. For most of human history, reading social context correctly was the difference between being accepted by the group and being cast out of a group tens of thousands of years ago often meant dying alone. So your brain became extremely good, frighteningly good, at absorbing the invisible rules of wherever it finds itself and shaping your behavior to fit. But here's the twist. If context can shape you toward cruelty, it can also shape you toward decency. Zimbardo himself became a walking case study in this later in his life. Decades after the prison experiment, he began researching what he called the banality of heroism. His question flipped. If ordinary situations can turn ordinary people into guards who abuse power, can ordinary situations also turn ordinary people into people who resist that pull? His answer was yes. And the deciding factor wasn't some rare trait like heroic courage. It was something much smaller: awareness. The people who resisted the pull of a bad role were the ones who noticed the pull happening in the first place. They caught themselves mid-slide and asked a simple question. Is this actually me acting, or is this the room acting through me? That question is the entire point of this video, because you are in roles right now that you didn't fully choose. You have a role at work, with a script you learned without anyone handing you a script. You have a role in your family, with expectations set decades before you had any say in them. You have a role online, where a screen name and an audience quietly nudge you toward performing a version of yourself that gets the most reaction. None of these roles are fake exactly, but none of them are fully you either. Here's where it gets stranger. A researcher named Solomon Asch ran an experiment in the 1950s that seems almost too simple to matter. He showed people a line on a card, then asked them to match it to one of 3 other lines of obviously different lengths. The correct answer was not even difficult, it was obvious. But he planted actors in the room who confidently gave the wrong answer out loud, one after another, before the real subject spoke. And a striking percentage of real subjects, faced with a room full of confident wrong answers, abandoned their own eyes and agreed with the group instead. They weren't stupid, they weren't blind. They were human. And being human means your sense of reality is more socially negotiable than you'd like to believe. So here is the real answer to the question, hiding underneath all of this. Are you in control? Mostly, you feel like you are. You feel like a solid, continuous you moving through your day, making your own choices, holding your own opinions. But underneath that feeling, your brain is constantly taking cues from costumes, titles, screens, group consensus, and unspoken rules, and quietly steering your behavior to match them, often without asking your permission first. This is not a reason to panic. It's a reason to pay attention. Because the guards in that basement at Stanford weren't monsters. They were people who stopped asking the one question that might have saved them from becoming someone they wouldn't recognize. Is this me, or is this the role? You are going to walk into rooms today that come with invisible instructions. A meeting where everyone nods along with an idea nobody actually agrees with. A group chat where cruelty gets normalized one joke at a time. A comment section that makes you meaner than you are at your kitchen table. None of these rooms will hand you a costume, but they will still try to dress you. The people who stay themselves inside all of that aren't the ones with the strongest willpower. They're the ones who notice the room shaping them and ask the question anyway. You think you know who you are. Maybe you do. But the safest way to actually find out isn't to trust the feeling of being in control. It's to keep asking every time the room starts to change you, whether the person acting is really you at all.